They cut their grocery bill to $200 a month, walked away from six-figure corporate salaries, and quietly built a YouTube channel that now pulls in an estimated $11,000 every 30 days. And most of their 800,000 subscribers have no idea how deep that number actually goes. That channel is Living Traditions Homestead, built from scratch by Kevin and Sarah Mathews out of 16 acres in the Missouri Ozarks. Two people who didn't grow up farming, didn't inherit land, and didn't have a roadmap for any of it. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what they built, why it matters, and why the story most people think they know about this channel is only about half of what's actually happening. There's a version of Kevin and Sarah Mathews that never made it to Missouri. In that version, Kevin keeps traveling for work. He's on the road most of the week, selling medical and dental equipment across the Phoenix area, chasing the next commission, spending more time in airports than at dinner tables. Sarah is grinding through her career as a human resources executive, managing people, managing policy, managing the kind of corporate pressure that doesn't clock out when you do. They live in a neighborhood with an HOA. They drive nice vehicles. On paper, they're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. And they're miserable. That's not a dramatic reframing of history. That's how they've described it themselves, repeatedly, in interviews and early channel videos. The jobs were successful. The lifestyle was suffocating. The more they built inside the system, the more they felt trapped by it. Kevin has talked about the travel, the missed family moments, the slow accumulation of things that didn't add up to a life he actually wanted. Sarah has been just as direct. She didn't want her daughters watching their parents chase money and call it happiness. Their daughters, Grace and Samantha, were 12 and 15 when the family made the move to Missouri in 2016. By that point, Kevin and Sarah had already been building toward a different life for 4 years. In 2012, they sold the corporate house in the HOA neighborhood and bought a rundown urban farm in Gilbert, Arizona. Their real estate agent told them to bulldoze it and start fresh. They didn't. Instead, they spent 2 years restoring the property, learning to grow food in a desert climate, getting out of debt, and quietly dismantling the version of their lives that no longer fit. Most people who talk about Living Traditions Homestead start the story in Missouri. The real story starts in that Gilbert backyard, with two people who had already decided, 4 years before anyone was watching. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around them saw coming. In July 2016, Kevin and Sarah packed up their family and drove to Ava, Missouri. Not Nashville, not the rolling hills of Tennessee where half of homesteading YouTube seems to land. Not even somewhere with an existing agricultural community they could tap into. Ava is a small town in Douglas County, tucked into the southwestern edge of the Ozarks. Low taxes, minimal zoning restrictions, land that was affordable enough that buying 16 acres was actually possible for a family stepping away from corporate income. They had no family ties in Missouri. They didn't grow up farming. What they had was a plan they'd spent years building and a clear-eyed assessment of what they needed to make it work. Grace swapped a school with 2,000 kids in her grade for one with 100. Samantha learned to hunt in the woods behind the property. Kevin started waking up before dawn to work with his hands. Sarah began documenting everything, the gardens, the animals, the failures, the harvests, and sharing it with anyone who would watch. At first, that audience was family and friends. Then it was strangers. Then it was people in Australia, Sweden, and Canada who found a woman in rural Missouri canning tomatoes on a Wednesday afternoon and couldn't stop watching. The channel grew not because Kevin and Sarah performed a lifestyle. It grew because they were living one, and the difference shows in every frame. There's no manufactured conflict, no dramatic feuds with neighbors, no cliffhangers built out of nothing. Just two people working land they chose, sharing what they learned, and doing it consistently for years. For the first 2 years, they uploaded 5 videos a week. An average 20-minute video, Kevin once said, takes around 8 hours from recording to edit. They were producing the equivalent of a part-time job in content output on top of running an actual farm. Eventually, they scaled back to 3 videos a week, longer, more detailed, more in-depth. The audience didn't drop, it grew. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. 815,000 subscribers, 127 million total views, over 1,000 videos published. Those numbers are from 2025. They represent nearly a decade of consistent output from a channel that has never gone viral in the traditional sense. No single video hit 10 million plays. No moment of controversy sent traffic spiking overnight. Living Traditions Homestead grew the slow way. The way you build a farm, one season at a time, one harvest at a time. until you look up and realize the thing you've been growing is substantial. The income picture is equally understated. Third-party analytics tools estimate the channel generates around $11,000 a month from YouTube ad revenue alone. That figure comes with the standard caveat that these tools estimate based on view counts and CPM ranges. Kevin and Sarah have never publicly disclosed their earnings. But $11,000 a month is a floor, not a ceiling, because the channel is one part of a much larger operation. There's a Patreon, where dedicated followers pay monthly for additional access and content. There's an Etsy shop selling handmade items from the homestead itself. There are affiliate partnerships, ranging from freeze dryers to raised garden beds to clothing brands, that generate a commission on every purchase made through their links. There are speaking engagements at farming events and expos. And there is a published book, Homestead Family, The New Frontier of Self-Sufficient Living, which continues to sell through Amazon years after its release. The channel is the face of the business, but the business runs well beyond what shows up in any YouTube dashboard. And here's what the comments kept asking. And here's the answer they never got. Until now, the version of Living Traditions Homestead that most subscribers watch is the garden updates, the food preservation videos, the seasonal harvests, the honest misadventures with animals that don't cooperate. That's the channel, that's what brought people in. But underneath that content, Kevin and Sarah have been running something that most homesteading YouTubers never managed to build, a genuinely self-sustaining farm that produces real income independent of the camera. They grow seed commercially for Baker Creek Seed Company, one of the most respected heirloom seed businesses in the country, based in nearby Mansfield, Missouri. Baker Creek has a national following among gardeners who prioritize open-pollinated, non-GMO varieties, and they source from growers who maintain those standards. The Mathews family is among them. It's not mentioned in most coverage of the channel. It doesn't show up in the analytics, but it means the farm has a revenue stream that would exist whether the camera was running or not. They've also been growing something harder to quantify, the community infrastructure around homesteading in their region. Kevin and Sarah have appeared at expos and festivals, done demonstrations on rabbit processing and sustainable farming practices, and positioned the channel as a teaching resource, not just entertainment. Their biggest international audience comes from Australia and Canada. Kevin has reflected publicly on the reach of what they've built, noting at one point that it's now possible for someone in rural Missouri to teach a farmer in Africa how to raise rabbits, and that this would have been almost unimaginable in any previous era. Their grocery bill runs around $200 a month. They heat with wood. They've been completely self-sufficient on meat for years. The farm grows roughly 80% of their vegetables. These aren't content claims. They're the operational reality of a family that genuinely lives what the channel documents. Most people in her position would have stayed comfortable. They didn't. And the next chapter of this story reflects that same instinct. There's a version of Living Traditions Homestead that exists in the early videos that you can't recreate now. Grace was 15 when the family moved to Missouri. Samantha was 12. They appear throughout those first years, helping in the garden, learning to hunt, figuring out what it means to grow up on working land instead of in a subdivision. Grace adjusted to a school where she knew every single one of her classmates. Samantha found her pace in the woods, where she learned to move quietly and watch for deer. Those girls are adults now. Grace is around 23. Samantha is around 21. The chapter of the channel where Kevin and Sarah were raising kids on a homestead and documenting that process in real time, that chapter is over. The family is still there, but the structure of it has changed, the way family structures always do when children grow up. This kind of transition is something most family YouTube channels handle badly. The content identity gets tied to a version of the family that doesn't exist anymore, and when the kids leave or grow up, the channel loses the thread it was following. Living Traditions Homestead avoided that trap because it was never really about the kids. It was about the land, the work, the philosophy. A set of values that doesn't age out when teenagers become adults. The channel continued posting through all of it. The upload pace shifted. Titles got more focused. The content leaned harder into preservation, food systems, and the operational details of running a homestead at scale. The audience followed. There were also smaller pivots that slipped by without much notice. A title in their recent upload catalog references stepping back from the farmer's market for a season, a signal that Kevin and Sarah are willing to evaluate every piece of what they do and make practical adjustments when something isn't serving the farm or the family well. They've done it before. They'll do it again. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What they did instead is the part nobody talks about. There's a line Sarah Mathews has used in interviews that doesn't get quoted as often as it should. She said they wanted to show their daughters an alternative to keeping up with the Joneses. Not a lecture about it, not a Pinterest board about it, an actual, lived alternative. A family that made a different choice and let their kids watch what that choice looked like from the inside. That's the thing about Living Traditions Homestead that gets lost in the subscriber counts and the income estimates and the farming statistics. The channel was always a teaching instrument. Kevin and Sarah have been explicit about that from the beginning. They describe themselves as teachers first. The homestead is the classroom. The camera is the window. What they've been teaching, specifically, is that the version of success that gets sold to most Americans, the salary, the house, the commute, the mortgage on a lifestyle you didn't fully choose, is negotiable. That it can be traded in, carefully and deliberately, for something that fits better. That the trade requires work, years of preparation, debt elimination, skill building, and a willingness to look foolish before you look capable. But that it's real, they're proof of it. Kevin was in his 40s when they made the move. Sarah was the same. These were not young people with nothing to lose. These were established professionals with careers and credit scores and social identities built around a particular version of success. And they walked away from it anyway, not on impulse, but after 4 years of methodical preparation, because they believed there was something better on the other side. They were right. Here's what the channel is still doing, quietly, in 2025. It's showing hundreds of thousands of people that the question isn't whether they could make a different choice. The question is whether they're willing to start preparing for one. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Living Traditions Homestead is still uploading, still growing, still operating the farm and the business and the community that has accumulated around both. The channel sits at 815,000 subscribers as of 2025, a number that puts them well within the top tier of homesteading content on YouTube, without the controversy, without the manufactured drama, and without the audience abandonment that has followed some of their peers when their personal lives or business decisions became the story. Kevin and Sarah have built something relatively rare in the creator economy, a channel whose longevity doesn't depend on virality. The audience that shows up for their videos isn't there for news cycles or trending topics. They're there because they trust Kevin and Sarah to tell them the truth about what's working on the farm and what isn't, what they're planting and why, what they preserved this week and how. It's a trust-based audience, which is the most durable kind. The book is still available, the affiliate partnerships are still active, the Patreon community is still running. Baker Creek is still receiving seed from 16 acres outside Ava, Missouri. The daughters are grown. The farm is producing. And the channel keeps going, not because Kevin and Sarah need the validation, but because teaching is what they said they were there to do, and they're still doing it. There will be a next chapter. There always is with a family that has demonstrated, more than once, that they're willing to make a major decision when the current season calls for one. What that chapter looks like, whether it's a new project, a shift in content direction, a book, a land expansion, or something the audience won't see coming, is the part worth watching for. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything the first time. They've shown they're capable of doing it again. Kevin and Sarah Mathews didn't get lucky. They got ready, 4 years before most people were paying attention. And then they moved. Whatever comes next for Living Traditions Homestead, the foundation they've built over nearly a decade in the Missouri Ozarks, isn't going anywhere. The farm is real. The skills are real. The audience is real. And the philosophy that drove the whole thing is still the same one Sarah described years ago. There is an alternative to the life most people are living, and it is possible to choose it. Keep an eye on the channel as they head deeper into 2025 and beyond. The daughters are grown, the farmer's market strategy is shifting, and Kevin and Sarah have proven, more than once, that when they make a quiet announcement, it tends to be the kind that changes everything. Here's the question worth thinking about. If you had spent years building a career, a salary, and a life that looks successful from the outside, would you have been willing to walk away from all of it the way Kevin and Sarah did? Or is that the kind of decision that's easier to admire from the outside than to actually make? Let me know where you stand in the comments below.